The story begins in 1942, the year Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in the United States. After this attack, America officially entered World War II, determined to take revenge on Japan at any cost. To strike back, the U.S. Navy sent several B-torpedo bomber aircrafts toward the South Pacific to destroy all Japanese submarines stationed there. Among those planes, there was one carrying 3 men: the MA pilot, Harold, the MA bomber, Tony, and the radio man, Gene. While returning from their mission, they fly high above the clouds and soon realize they're lost. Their fuel is running out, and they can't find their way back. Gene tries to make contact through the radio, but due to weak signal, he can't hear anything clearly. Suddenly, he hears a Japanese voice. On the radio, alarmed, he unplugs the wire and starts sending Morse code messages, but fuel continues to run low. Harold, the pilot, tells Gene to reconnect and try again, but no response comes. With no other option left, Harold decides to attempt an emergency landing. Right over the vast ocean, he instructs his crew to gather whatever essentials they can because they are about to land in the water. They successfully land the plane in the sea, but a problem arises. Tony and Gene's seatbelts get stuck. They start sinking with the aircraft. Luckily, they manage to unbuckle just in time and swim up to the surface, where Harold is already floating. They find an inflatable airboat and climb into it, but now they face a serious crisis. No food, no water. All supplies were left behind in the plane, which has already sunk. They're now stranded in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean, surrounded by nothing but endless water. Still, they hope the U.S. Navy will find and rescue them. Soon, they spot a U.S. Navy aircraft team flying overhead. Harold tells them to throw something noticeable into the water, like a parachute, so the plane can see them. But the parachute was also lost with the aircraft. They don't even have a flare gun to signal their location, so they remove their life jackets, wave them in the air, and shout. But the Navy plane is flying too high and too far to notice them. Eventually, it flies away. Harold, the pilot, tells them that this was likely their only chance at being found. Tony says they won't just leave us here, they'll come back. But Harold, being the most experienced, knows the bitter truth. They're on their own now. He tells them to remove their shoes. They're in for a long journey, and space on the raft is too limited. Tony and Gene toss their shoes into the ocean, but Harold keeps his. Surprised, Gene asks, "Why didn't you throw your shoes?" Harold replies, "If we ever find land, one of us will need to walk, so we'll need at least one pair." And just like that, their first day passes, without food or water, just floating in the ocean. At night, they can't all sleep at once due to the cramped space, so they take turns. Later, Harold asks, "Does anyone want water?" Tony and Gene look at him in shock. Then Harold urinates in his shoe and drinks it, fully aware that fresh water is going to be hard to come by. The next morning, Harold explains, "We're stuck in the ocean. We're drifting toward Hawaii, which is nearly 900 miles away. Behind us is South America, about 6,000 miles in the other direction." As a pilot, he knows how to navigate and estimate distances. "If we keep drifting like this," he says, "we could reach land in a few weeks." Tony is shocked. "Even if we make it, we'll die of hunger and thirst before we get there." Gene points to the sea. "There are lots of fish here. We'll have to figure something out." They look through their limited supplies and find a magazine from a gun. Inside there's a spring, which they use to create a makeshift fishing hook. They toss the line into the water. Eventually something catches, They try to pull it in, but the rope snaps, and the hook is gone. Jean says, "In this water there are many fish, but you can continue the story from here. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a YouTube script, short video summary, or voiceover style breakdown. Here is the English translation of your passage. Someone is even hungrier than us. Although they're stuck in the ocean, the heat is unbearable. John jumps into the water and says he can't bear the heat any longer. Tony is about to jump in too, but Harold stops him. He says he's heard there are sharks in the water. When Jean is told this, he quickly climbs back onto the boat. This means they can no longer go into the water. Time slowly passes, and they spend a total of 5 days on the boat. For 5 days, they haven't eaten or drunk anything, so all three become very weak. When Tony can't bear it anymore, he tries to drink seawater, but Harold stops him. He explains that drinking seawater will only dehydrate the body even more. The main reason they got stuck here is that Harold, the pilot, was heading west and asked John to confirm their direction. But over the radio, John was told they were supposed to go east. This confusion led them off course, and because they ran out of fuel, they ended up stranded in the ocean. Suddenly, Harold remembers he has a pencil in his shirt pocket, which makes him very happy. He pulls out the pencil and says they can make a chart to figure out their exact location. He starts making a chart on the raft. Once he figures out their direction, he says they need to stop the raft from drifting with the wind. So using their life jackets and other supplies, they make an anchor to keep the raft stable. That way, when they pull it out, they can move in the direction the wind is blowing. This will help them move toward where they want to go. They drop the anchor into the water and the boat becomes stable. Then they all pray. Jean says, "We haven't done everything right in life, but we need your help." Harold prays, asking God to help all the rafts in this ocean, and theirs is one of them. Tony adds, "What my friend said is true, but what we need most right now is rain." However, it doesn't rain, and Tony becomes disappointed. John tells him to give God a little time. That night, while they're sleeping, it starts to rain. After several days, they finally get to drink a sip of water, which brings them great relief because their bodies had become completely dehydrated. The next day, Jean is shown still trying to catch fish after many days, but hasn't been able to catch a single one. Harold says he's never seen a more patient fisherman than Jean, who's been trying for a whole week without catching a single fish. Jean replies, "Where I come from, there's a saying, if you don't catch, you don't eat." But even Jean is now frustrated. He pulls out a knife from his pocket. Harold warns him again, saying, "I've told you many times, always keep that knife in your pocket. It's the only thing we have that could puncture this raft." But Jean doesn't listen and starts waiting for a fish in the water again. Soon as he sees a fish, he stabs at it, but he thinks he's accidentally stabbed the raft. He panics and says, "I made a mistake, I stabbed the raft." Harold tells him not to pull the knife out because if he does, water will flood into the raft and they'll lose it. But Jean then sees that he didn't stab the raft, he actually hit a baby shark. He pulls it onto the raft and the three of them kill it. Inside its stomach, they find many small fish. After a whole week, they finally eat their first bite of food. This not only brings them happiness, but also gives their bodies some energy. At this point, Harold says, "I'm going home. My wife is going to be really mad at me." He asks the other two if they are married. Turns out, they don't know each other very well personally. Tony says he is married but also has a girlfriend. Jean says he neither has a wife nor a girlfriend. Tony then tells Jean, "When we get back, you should date my sister. She's really beautiful." While they're talking, they notice many sharks circling their raft. That's because they had killed and eaten a baby shark. And now, let me know if you'd like to continue the translation or turn this into a script, voiceover, or video format. Here is the English translations of your story section, continuing in the same narrative, voiceover style Sao's tone. Some blood had also spilled into the water, and the smell of it attracted many sharks on to their raft. But fortunately, the sharks don't attack. Instead, they slowly swim away. The South Pacific is known for being home to many sharks. At any moment, these predators could flip their raft and kill them all, but this time, their hard luck saves them. Now, even though they've finally eaten and had some water, as the days go by, they begin to weaken again. One night, while Jean has his hand in the water, a shark attacks at him. It wounds his hand, but thankfully, the injury isn't serious. Jean's luck saves him once more. Later, Jean sees something in the distance. He believes it's an island and excitedly shows it to Tony. But Tony says there's nothing there and it's just Jean's imagination. They start experiencing strange dreams. By the 15th day, things take a darker turn. That morning, Tony is holding his gun. He quietly whispers to Jean, "Give me your gun and don't make a sound." Jean hands it over without a word. Tony then notices a bird has landed on their raft right near where Harold is sleeping. Jean takes aim and shoots, and the bullet hits the bird, but it falls into the ocean before they can catch it. When Harold realizes they've hit a bird, he jumps into the sea to retrieve it. He swims toward it, but just as he grabs it, he notices a shark approaching. Harold rushes back to the raft, and just before the shark can reach him, he climbs aboard. The shark swims beneath the raft and disappears. Once again, Harold narrowly escapes death, but at least now they have food again. In 15 days, this is only the second time climbs aboard. They've eaten anything, but as the days go on, the situation starts affecting their mental health. They all begin having bizarre dreams, hallucinations, and confusion. By now, they've spent 20 days in the ocean. One morning, Harold wakes up and sees that no one is on duty, meaning no one is monitoring the wind or their direction. He gets angry and says, "I gave you an order and you didn't follow it." Jean responds, "There's nothing to look at, and by now we should have reached an island." "Where is it?" Harold says, "I have a rough picture in my mind." The others are stunned. "A rough picture? You mean you're not even sure where we are?" Jean is furious. He accuses Harold, "This is all your fault. We had to land in the ocean because you didn't realize where our ship was. You took us in too far off course, and that's why we went out of range. We couldn't contact them anymore." Harold admits the truth. When they were flying in the air, he fell asleep for a few seconds, and when he woke up, they had already drifted far off course. By then, it was too late. They didn't know where they were, and the fuel was gone. That's why they had no choice but to land in the ocean. The truth finally hits. Harold is the one responsible for everything that's happened, and he's filled with guilt. His eyes well up with tears as he apologizes to both of them. Jean quietly picks up the map Harold had drawn. "Let me know if you'd like the next part translated, or if you want this formatted as a YouTube script, short film voiceover, or documentary narration. Here is the full English translation of your final story segment, keeping the narrative and voiceover-friendly tone. Ideal for a script or story video." Jean had drawn a map on top of the lifeboard jacket and said, "This is what's going to take us home now. To make two paddle blades, one from the soles. This way, they could steer the raft in whatever direction they want." Tony then jokes and says, "Whoever spots an island first, the other two have to take him out for dinner at a restaurant of his choice." But their journey is far from over. A few more days pass. They've now been in the ocean for 30 days. After 30 days, they don't even have the strength to speak. They're extremely thirsty, starving, and have no motivation left to keep going. That night, it begins to rain again, which gives them another chance to collect and drink water, but then they see a massive storm coming their way. They try to escape, but they get caught in the storm. Their raft flips over, and since Tony doesn't know how to swim, he goes missing. Luckily, they spot Tony on the other side of the raft. They manage to flip the raft upright again, and after great struggle, all three climb back aboard. Somehow, they do survive the deadly storm. The next morning, they are shown completely exhausted. The little supplies they had were washed away by the ocean the night before. Now they've accepted that they probably won't survive. They lie there like living corpses on the raft, lost in thoughts of home. Harold thinks of his wife, and Jean begins to hallucinate. He imagines Tony's sister sitting in the middle of the ocean, the way Tony had once described her. Jean says, "I think I've fallen in love with your sister." Tony smiles and replies, "You two would make a great couple." Hearing this, Harold becomes deeply sad. He says, "I didn't know it would all end like this. Forgive me." Harold blames himself for everything that's happened. Just then, Tony sits up with great difficulty and says, "We've come so far. We can't give up now." He starts rowing the boat with his hands. Seeing this, Harold and Jean also join in, even though they have almost no energy left. Despite trying to motivate themselves, their bodies are completely drained. After 3-4 days, they're nearly dead. They don't even have the strength to talk. In this desperate state, Tony says, "I had a dream. I saw a big green field." Harold replies, "I've seen that dream, though twice." Suddenly, Harold starts drinking a little bit of seawater, thinking that this is the end and that there's no hope left. But then Jean, lying down, says, "I see something green ahead." When the three of them get up and look, they see an island. A sudden burst of hope and energy fills them. After 34 days lost at sea, they've finally found land. They begin paddling with their hands as hard as they can toward the island. In just a few moments, the three men reach the shore. After 34 long days and they finally touch land, and it brings them immense peace. On the beach, they see 2 huts, and they slowly walk toward them, and just like that, their painful journey finally comes to an end. On February 20th, 1942, they arrive at a beach called Tiwa de Puka Puka. These 3 men survived because they never gave up hope. And our hope is something that teaches us how to fight, how to move forward. It gives us courage, and that's exactly what kept these men alive. At the end, we learn that the 3 of them had traveled more than 10,000 miles in that tiny raft. Harold was awarded by the Navy for leading his crew so well through this impossible mission. But he never flew an aircraft again. Tony recovered fully and continued his career in the Navy. When he passed away in 1986, his ashes were scattered at sea. Jean went on to work in radio communications during the war. In 1946, Tao married Tony's sister, Frances. And finally, the film shows the real-life photos towns of all 3 of them, proof of how far they went and how long they fought to survive. And this is how this untrue story ends. If you'd like to hear the story of another movie, let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, be sure to give it a like. And for more amazing true stories, subscribe to the channel. Would you like this now formatted as a YouTube video script or voiceover with visuals and background music suggestions?